The wind howled through the skeletal trees lining Hollow Lane, a forgotten road in rural Virginia, where the air always seemed to carry the faint tang of decay. The Miller house stood at the end of the lane, its warped clapboard siding peeling like dead skin, windows clouded with grime. It was the kind of place neighbors avoided, where even the boldest kids dared not venture on Halloween. On that crisp autumn evening, the Miller family, Thomas Miller, his wife Ellen, and their 2 children, Sarah and Jacob, vanished. No screams, no signs of struggle, no trace. The house was empty, the family's belongings untouched, dishes in the sink, a half-finished puzzle on the dining table, a radio still playing static. The town of Ashwood whispered of curses, of secrets buried in the soil, but the police found nothing. The case went cold, locked away in a dusty file cabinet, forgotten by all but the most superstitious. January 12, 2025, Ashwood, Virginia. Detective David Loki stood in the kitchen of the Miller house, his breath visible in the frigid air. The call had come early that morning. Thomas Miller, presumed dead for years, had been found in a ditch off Route 17, his body riddled with strange wounds, none fresh enough to suggest a recent struggle. The county coroner ruled it a heart attack, but something about the scene gnawed at Loki. He'd been transferred to Ashwood after a botched case in Richmond left his career in tatters. A missing girl he couldn't save, her face still haunting his dreams. This case, though, felt like a chance at redemption, or damnation. The house hadn't been touched in decades. Dust coated every surface, and the air smelled of mildew and something sharper, like rusted iron. Loki's flashlight beam swept across the kitchen, catching on a cabinet door slightly ajar. He tugged it open, expecting nothing but cobwebs. Instead, the entire cabinet swung forward, revealing a hidden passageway. The air from below was damp, heavy with the scent of earth and something fouler. His pulse quickened. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, his voice swallowed by the silence. Loki descended the narrow wooden stairs, each step creaking under his weight. At the bottom, he found a basement that shouldn't have existed. No record of it in the house's blueprints. The beam of his flashlight illuminated a grim tableau. 5 skeletal remains, arranged in a circle on the dirt floor, their bones yellowed and brittle. Among them, a woman's skeleton wore a tattered dress, a silver locket glinting at her throat. Ellen Miller's locket, Loki recognized from old case photos. Nearby, a pile of belongings, wallets, keys, a child-stuffed rabbit, lay scattered like offerings. But the children's remains were missing, and there was a 6th spot in the circle, empty, as if waiting for another body. Loki's stomach churned as he spotted a leather-bound notebook wedged between 2 rocks. Its pages were brittle, the ink faded but legible. The handwriting was erratic, scrawled by someone in a hurry, or in fear. The first entry read, September 10th, 1996. "They think I'm crazy, but I know what I saw. The man in the woods, he's watching us. He says we're chosen. Ellen doesn't believe me, but the kids are scared. I can't let him take us." Loki's fingers tightened around the notebook. Thomas Miller had written this, but who was the man in the woods? And why had no one found this basement before? He flipped to the last page, where a string of numbers was scrawled in red ink. 38.9047, minus 77.0164. Coordinates. His phone had no signal down here, but he memorized them, his mind racing. Was this a lead to where Thomas had been hiding all these years? Or something worse? As he climbed back up, a faint sound stopped him, a low, rhythmic tapping from somewhere deeper in the house. Not the wind, not a loose pipe. It was deliberate, like fingers drumming on wood. Loki froze, his hand on his holster. The tapping stopped, replaced by silence so thick it pressed against his eardrums. He called out, "Ashwood PD, show yourself." No response, but as he reached the kitchen, he saw it. A shadow moving past the window, too quick to make out. Someone was out there. Loki's radio crackled to life, making him jump. "Detective, you still at the Miller place?" It was Sheriff Daniels, his voice tight. "Get out of there. Now. We got a call. Someone's been watching that house all week." Loki's throat went dry. He glanced at the notebook in his hand, the coordinates burning in his mind. Whoever was out there knew he'd found something. And they didn't want him to keep looking. What's hidden in the Miller house? Who's watching from the woods? Read part 2 to uncover the truth. Comment where you're tuning in from, and like if you want to know what Detective Loki finds next. January 13th, 2025, Ashwood, Virginia. The morning sun barely pierced the fog that clung to Hollow Lane, wrapping the Miller house in a shroud of gray. Detective David Loki sat in his unmarked cruiser, the leather-bound notebook open on his lap. The coordinates, 38.9047, minus 77.0164, pointed to a spot in Northern Virginia, near a dense forest preserve outside Ashwood. His phone's GPS confirmed it. An abandoned quarry, long since reclaimed by vines and brambles. Loki's gut told him the answers to the Miller family's disappearance were there, but the shadow he'd seen last night lingered in his mind, a warning he couldn't shake. He'd barely slept, haunted by the notebook's entries. Thomas Miller's words were frantic, disjointed. September 15th, 1996. He came again last night. Stood outside Sarah's window, just staring. Ellen says it's my imagination, but I saw his mask, red, like blood. He whispered about a red room, where we'd be reborn. Loki's jaw tightened. A red mask. A red room. It sounded like the ravings of a man unhinged, but the basement's grim discovery, Ellen's skeleton among the others, proved something sinister had happened here. Loki drove to the Ashwood County Archives, a crumbling brick building that smelled of moldy paper and neglect. He needed answers about the Miller house, about Thomas, about anything that could explain the bodies or the missing children. The clerk, an older woman with wiry gray hair, eyed him warily as he requested records on Hollow Lane. "You're poking into the Miller case, aren't you?" she said, her voice low. "Folks around here don't like talking about it. Bad blood." She handed him a thin file, its edges yellowed. "This is all we got. Most of it was lost years ago." The file was sparse: property deeds, a 1980 survey of the house, and a single police report from 1996, heavily redacted. One detail stood out: a mention of a local group investigated for unusual activities near the quarry in the early 90s. No names, no specifics, just a note that the case was closed due to lack of evidence. Loki's instincts screamed cover-up. He photocopied the file and left, feeling the clerk's eyes on his back. At the station, Sheriff Daniels intercepted him. "Loki, drop the Miller case," he said, his tone clipped. "It's a dead end. You're stirring up trouble we don't need." Daniels was a burly man, his face etched with years of small-town politics. Loki didn't trust him. Hadn't since he'd arrived in Ashwood. 5 bodies in a basement isn't a dead end. Loki shot back. Daniels' eyes narrowed. "You don't know what you're digging into, son. Let it go." Loki ignored the warning. Back at his desk, he cross-referenced the coordinates with old maps. The quarry had been owned by a now-defunct company, Ashwood Mineral Company, which collapsed after a 1995 lawsuit alleging illegal land use. The lawsuit mentioned a restricted site deep in the quarry, but details were sealed. Loki's pulse quickened. He needed to see that quarry. As he grabbed his coat, his phone buzzed, an unknown number. He answered, but there was only static, then a faint whisper. "You're close." The line went dead. Loki stared at the phone, his skin prickling. The voice was low, distorted, impossible to place. He checked the call log, but the number was blocked. Shaking it off, he headed for his car, only to notice a black sedan parked across the street. Its windows were tinted, but he swore he saw movement inside. Someone was watching him. The quarry was a 40-minute drive through winding roads, the forest growing denser with each mile. Loki parked at the edge of the preserve, the coordinates leading him to a rusted gate half buried in overgrowth. He climbed over, his boots sinking into the muddy earth. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp stone. As he pushed deeper, he found signs of recent activity: tire tracks, a cigarette butt, a broken branch. Someone had been here. The quarry opened before him, a gaping wound in the earth, its walls jagged and moss-covered. At its center stood a concrete structure, barely visible beneath vines. It wasn't on any map. Loki approached, his flashlight cutting through the dusk. The structure was a bunker, its steel door rusted but intact. A symbol was carved into the door, a circle with a slash through it, crude but deliberate. His heart pounded. The notebook hadn't mentioned a symbol, but it felt like a marker, a warning. Loki pried the door open, the hinges screaming. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the smell of chemicals. His flashlight revealed a narrow corridor leading to a steel hatch in the floor. He knelt, his fingers brushing the cold metal. From below came a faint hum, like machinery, or something alive. He tugged at the hatch, but it wouldn't budge. As he stood, his flashlight caught something on the wall, a faded photograph pinned to a corkboard. It showed a group of people in white coats, standing in a room painted red. One figure, taller than the rest, wore a red mask. Loki's breath caught. Before he could process it, his radio crackled. "Loki, get out of there." It was Daniels, his voice panicked. "We just got a tip. Someone's headed your way." Loki spun, his hand on his gun, but the quarry was silent. Too silent. Then he heard it. A twig snapping, footsteps crunching closer. He ducked behind the bunker, peering into the trees. A figure moved in the shadows, too far to make out, but the glint of something metallic caught his eye. A blade? A gun? The footsteps stopped. Loki held his breath, the hum from the hatch growing louder in his ears. Whatever was down there, someone didn't want him to find it. What's hidden in the bunker? Who's stalking Loki? Dive into Part 3 to unravel the mystery. Share your theory in the comments and subscribe to keep up with the truth. January 14th, 2025, Ashwood, Virginia. The quarry was a labyrinth of shadows, the air thick with the scent of wet stone and pine. Detective David Loki crouched behind the bunker, his pulse hammering as the footsteps in the trees faded. Whoever was out there had vanished, but the glint of metal he'd seen lingered in his mind. A knife, a gun, or something worse. The hum from the hatch beneath the bunker's floor pulsed like a heartbeat, urging him to move. He gripped the photograph he'd taken from the corkboard. A group in white coats, a red-painted room, and that figure in the red mask, staring directly at the camera. Loki's instinct screamed that this was no ordinary crime scene. The Miller family's disappearance, the bodies in the basement, the coordinates, they all pointed here, to this forgotten scar in the earth. He returned to the hatch, its surface cold and unyielding. Using a crowbar from his car, he pried it open, the metal groaning in protest. A rusted ladder descended into darkness, the hum growing louder, vibrating through his boots. Loki hesitated, the sheriff's warning echoing in his head. Someone's headed your way. But he'd come too far to turn back. He clipped the photograph to his notebook, next to Thomas Miller's scrawled coordinates, and descended. The ladder led to a concrete chamber, its walls slick with condensation. The hum came from a generator in the corner, its cables snaking into the shadows. Loki's flashlight revealed a series of rooms branching off the main chamber, each door marked with that same circle and slash symbol from the bunker's entrance. The air was heavy with the stench of chemicals and something organic, like rotting meat. He pushed open the first door, revealing a lab, rusted equipment, shattered glass vials, and a whiteboard covered in faded diagrams. Words like reprogramming and compliance were scrawled in red marker, alongside a list of names. Ellen Miller's was among them, circled. Loki's throat tightened. This wasn't just a murder scene. It was something planned, something systematic. He moved to the next room, finding a filing cabinet stuffed with documents. Most were water-damaged, but one folder was intact, labeled Project Ascent. Inside were medical reports, psychological profiles, and a single page detailing a behavioral modification program, funded by Ashwood Mineral Company in the 1990s. The goal? To create compliant subjects for strategic operations. Loki's mind reeled. Human experimentation? In rural Virginia? The folder mentioned a lead researcher, Dr. Samuel Vance, but no photo. Could he be the man in the red mask? A sudden noise, a metallic clang from the chamber, snapped Loki back to the present. He drew his gun, his flashlight sweeping the darkness. Ashwood PD. Show yourself. His voice echoed, unanswered. He moved toward the sound, finding a third room with a steel table bolted to the floor. On it lay a cassette recorder, its tape still spinning. He pressed play, and a woman's voice filled the room. Ellen Miller's, trembling but clear. October 17th, 1996. They took Sarah and Jacob to the Red Room. Thomas tried to stop them, but the man in the mask, he said, "We're part of something bigger. I don't know where we are, but I hear machines. If anyone finds this, please." The tape cut off with a scream. Loki's hand shook as he pocketed the cassette. The children weren't among the basement bodies. Could they still be alive? He scanned the room, noticing a faint scratch mark on the wall. A child's drawing of a tree with a single word: help. His chest tightened, the memory of the missing girl from Richmond flooding back. He'd failed her, but he wouldn't fail Sarah and Jacob. As he turned to leave, his phone buzzed in his pocket. No signal down here, yet a text from an unknown number flashed on the screen. "You're not alone." Loki spun, his flashlight catching a shadow darting past the doorway. Not the same figure from the woods. This one was smaller, almost childlike. He called out, but it was gone. His radio crackled, Sheriff Daniel's voice cutting through. "Loki, damn it, where are you? We found another body near the quarry, fresh. Get out now." Loki's blood ran cold. Another body? He climbed the ladder, emerging into the bunker just as headlights pierced the quarry's darkness. A black sedan, the same one from town, idled at the gate. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out, his face obscured by a hood. But Loki saw the glint of a red mask under the hood, its surface catching the moonlight. The man didn't move, just stood there, watching. Loki's grip on his gun tightened, but before he could act, the man turned and vanished into the trees. Loki ran to his car, his mind racing. The cassette, the documents, the red mask, it all pointed to a conspiracy buried for decades. But the text on his phone haunted him most. "You're not alone." As he started the engine, his radio crackled again, but this time it wasn't Daniel's. A child's voice, faint and distorted, whispered, "They're still here, in the Red Room." "Who's in the Red 18, 2025, Ashwood, Virginia?" The forest was silent save for the distant hum of cicadas, but Detective David Loki felt anything but alone. He stood in the overgrown quarry, the rusted gate creaking behind him as he clutched the worn leather notebook, its cryptic coordinates, 38.9047, minus 77.0164, burned into his memory. The Miller house, with its hidden basement and 5 skeletal remains, had already shaken him. Ellen Miller's locket, the pile of victims' belongings, and Thomas Miller's frantic journal entries about a man in the woods and a red room hinted at something far darker than a simple disappearance. Now, deep in the quarry's abandoned bunker, Loki had uncovered a chilling truth. Project Descent, a shadowy experiment in behavioral reprogramming tied to the defunct Ashwood Mineral Company. The cassette tape he'd found, Ellen's voice trembling as she described her children being taken, confirmed his worst fears. Sarah and Jacob Miller, missing since 1996, weren't among the basement's bodies. Could they still be out there? Loki's flashlight flickered as he emerged from the bunker, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and pine. The black sedan he'd seen tailing him was back, its driver, a man in a red mask, watching from the shadows before vanishing into the trees. Loki's phone buzzed again, the same unknown number. "You're digging too deep." His radio crackled with a child's voice. "They're still here, in the Red Room." His heart pounded. The quarry wasn't just a crime scene. It was the heart of something monstrous. He drove to the Ashwood County morgue, the cassette and Project Descent documents tucked in his jacket. The coroner, a wiry man named Harris, led him to the latest body, a John Doe, found hours ago near the quarry. The corpse was fresh, no more than a day old, with the same strange wounds as Thomas Miller, shallow, precise cuts, almost ritualistic. Harris pointed to a detail Loki hadn't noticed before, a faint tattoo on the man's wrist, the circle and slash symbol from the bunker. "Seen this before?" Loki asked. Harris shook his head, but his eyes darted away, nervous. Loki didn't press. He'd learned to spot lies in Ashwood. Back at the station, Loki dug into Dr. Samuel Vance, the lead researcher named in the Project Descent files. A quick search revealed Vance had vanished in 1997, shortly after the Miller disappearance. No death certificate, no trace, just a single photo from an old university archive. Loki froze. The man in the photo had sharp features, graying hair, and a cold stare. He could be the man in the red mask, but there was no proof. Loki cross-referenced Vance's name with local records and found a connection. Vance had consulted for Ashwood Mineral Company, and his last known address was a cabin near the quarry, seized by the county in 1998 for unpaid taxes. Loki's gut twisted. He needed to see that cabin. The drive to the cabin was tense, the forest closing in around the narrow road. Loki's phone buzzed again. Another text. Stop now, or you'll join them. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The cabin was a decaying relic, its windows boarded, the air heavy with mildew. Inside, Loki found signs of recent use. Fresh footprints in the dust, a half-eaten sandwich, and a locked safe in the floor. He pried it open, revealing a stack of Polaroids, children, bound and blindfolded, in a room with red walls. One photo showed Sarah Miller, her face pale but alive, dated 1997. Loki's breath caught. She'd survived, at least for a year. But where was she now? He found another item in the safe, a small key with the same circle and slash symbol etched into it. It didn't match any lock in the cabin. As he pocketed it, he heard a creak outside, a footstep on the porch. He drew his gun and crept to the window. The black sedan was parked in the drive, but no one was visible. Then his radio crackled, and the same child's voice whispered, "I'm still here, in the red room. Find me." Loki's blood ran cold. The voice was Sarah's, he was sure of it. But how? Was it a recording, a trick, or something else? He stepped outside, scanning the trees. A figure moved in the distance, small, fleeting, like the shadow in the bunker. Not the man in the red mask, but someone else. Loki called out, but the figure vanished. As he reached his car, he noticed something new. A fresh carving on the driver's door, the circle and slash symbol, still damp with sap. Someone was here, watching, taunting him. His phone buzzed again, a single word, "Run." Is Sarah Miller still alive? What does the key unlock? Dive into part 4 to uncover the next piece of the puzzle. Share your theory in the comments, and subscribe to stay in the hunt for the truth. January 19th, 2025, Ashwood, Virginia. The forest around the quarry seemed to breathe, its shadows shifting as if alive. Detective David Loki gripped the small key he'd found in the cabin safe, its circle and slash symbol catching the dim light of his cruiser's dashboard. The Polaroids haunted him, Sarah Miller's pale face, dated a year after her family's disappearance, proof she'd survived whatever horror had unfolded in 1996. The child's voice on his radio, whispering, "I'm still here, in the red room," echoed in his mind. Was Sarah alive, or was someone playing a cruel game? The texts from the unknown number, "You're digging too deep. Run," felt like a noose tightening. Loki knew he was close to the truth, but the man in the red mask, the shadowy figure tied to Project Descent, was always one step ahead. Loki returned to the station, ignoring Sheriff Daniels' glares. Daniels had been pushing him to drop the case, but Loki's discovery of the Project Descent documents, detailing a behavioral reprogramming experiment, and the fresh body near the quarry, suggested a cover-up that reached higher than the small-town sheriff. He locked himself in his office and spread out the evidence. Thomas Miller's notebook, Ellen's cassette, the Polaroids, and the key. The notebook's final entry gnawed at him. October 17th, 1996. The red room is under the earth. They're changing us. I hid the key where no one will look. The key in his hand had to be the one Thomas mentioned. But what did it unlock? Loki traced the coordinates from the notebook again. 38.9047, minus 77.0164, and noticed something he'd missed. A second set of numbers scrawled in the margins, fainter, almost erased. 38.9051, minus 77.0158, a quarter mile from the quarry's bunker. He pulled up a satellite map, zooming in on the new coordinates. There, hidden in the forest, was a small structure, unmarked on any official record. A second bunker? A storage shed? He grabbed his gear, ignoring the late hour. He had to know. The drive to the new coordinates was treacherous, the road barely a path through the dense woods. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and damp soil, and the silence felt oppressive, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig. Loki parked and hiked the final stretch, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The structure was a low concrete building, its entrance sealed with a heavy steel door. The circle and slash symbol was etched into it, and a small keyhole gleamed in the center. Loki's heart raced as he inserted the key. It turned with a soft click. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the smell of rust and chemicals. The room was small, its walls painted a faded red, the red room from Ellen's cassette. A single metal chair sat in the center, its restraints rusted but intact. On the floor lay a child's shoe, scuffed and small, unmistakably Sarah's from the case photos. Loki's stomach churned. He searched the room, finding a hidden panel behind a rusted cabinet. It opened to reveal a cache of files, labeled with names and dates. One caught his eye. Subject 12. Sarah Miller, 1997. Reprogramming incomplete. Transferred. Transferred where? Before he could read more, a shadow loomed in the doorway. Loki spun, gun drawn, to face a man in a red mask, his eyes cold and unblinking. "You shouldn't be here, detective," the man said, his voice low, almost familiar. Loki's finger tightened on the trigger. "Dr. Vance?" he asked, recalling the researcher from the project to send files. The man tilted his head, the mask glinting. "Vance is gone, but the work continues." He stepped closer, a syringe in his hand, its contents glowing faintly in the dim light. Loki fired a warning shot, the sound deafening in the small room. The man froze, then lunged. Loki dodged, tackling him to the ground. The mask clattered off, revealing a face scarred and gaunt. Not Vance, but someone else, someone local. "Who are you?" Loki demanded, pinning him. The man laughed, a hollow sound. "You think I'm the end? The circle goes higher than you can imagine." Before Loki could press further, the man bit down hard, foam forming at his mouth. Cyanide. He was dead in seconds. Loki staggered back, his mind reeling. The circle. He grabbed the files and the man's phone, which buzzed with a new message. Subject 12 is active. Find her. Loki's blood ran cold. Sarah was alive, but part of what? He stumbled outside, the forest closing in around him. His radio crackled, and Sarah's voice came through again, clearer this time. "They're watching you, detective. Run." Headlights flashed through the trees, the black sedan, closing in fast. Loki sprinted to his car, the files clutched to his chest. As he peeled away, a figure stepped into the road, a girl, pale and thin, her eyes wide with fear. "Sarah." Before he could stop, she vanished into the woods, and the sedan roared closer. Is Sarah Miller reaching out for help? Or is it a trap? What is the circle? Uncover the truth in Part 5. Share your theory in the comments and subscribe to follow Loki's fight. January 20th, 2025, Ashwood, Virginia. The forest blurred past Detective David Loki's cruiser as he floored the gas, the black sedan's headlights glaring in his rearview mirror. The files from the Red Room, proof of Project Ascent's twisted experiments, slid across the passenger seat, their weight a reminder of the truth he'd uncovered. Sarah Miller, missing since 1996, was alive, labeled Subject 12, and transferred after surviving the horrors of the Red Room. The man in the red mask, now dead by his own hand, had spoken of the circle, a shadowy network tied to the experiments. The girl Loki had glimpsed in the road, pale, terrified, possibly Sarah, haunted him. Was she reaching out? Or was this a trap set by the circle? The child's voice on his radio, whispering, "They're watching you, detective. Run," echoed in his ears as the sedan gained ground. Loki swerved onto a side road, the sedan's tires screeching behind him. He needed to lose them and get the files to someone he could trust. But who? Sheriff Daniels had warned him off the case, and the coroner's nervous glances suggested he knew more than he let on. Loki's phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "You can't outrun us." He gritted his teeth, tossing the phone onto the seat. The sedan rammed his bumper, jolting him forward. Enough. He slammed on the brakes, grabbed his gun, and leapt out, aiming at the sedan's windshield. "Ashwood PD. Get out now." The sedan idled, its tinted windows revealing nothing. Then it reversed, vanishing into the night. Loki didn't wait. He drove to a motel on the edge of town, a run-down place, where the clerk didn't ask questions. In his room, he spread the files across the bed. The documents detailed Project Ascent's final phase, a 1996 experiment to reprogram subjects for strategic compliance, funded by a shell company linked to Ashwood Mineral Company. Sarah's file was chilling. Subject 12, female, age 10. Resistant to initial conditioning. Transferred to secondary facility, 1997. A handwritten note added. Circle oversight required. Other files listed dozens of subjects, many marked terminated, their names matching missing persons reports from the region. Ellen Miller's file confirmed her death in the Red Room, but Jacob, her son, was unaccounted for. Loki found a map of the files, marked with a location 10 miles from the quarry, an old psychiatric hospital, shuttered in the 1980s. The secondary facility? He cross-referenced it with Thomas Miller's notebook, finding a matching reference. They took her to the hospital. The circle watches everything. Loki's pulse quickened. If Sarah was alive, she was there. But the circle, whoever they were, knew he was closing in. He headed to the hospital under cover of darkness, the building looming like a decayed monument, its windows black and jagged. The air smelled of mildew and ash, and the silence was broken only by the distant howl of a coyote. Loki entered through a broken side door, his flashlight revealing peeling walls and scattered medical equipment. Graffiti covered the halls, but one symbol stood out, the circle and slash, spray-painted in red. He followed it, descending to the basement, where the air grew colder, heavier. The basement was a maze of corridors, some blocked by debris. Loki found a locked door with the same symbol etched into it. His key, the one from the cabin, fit perfectly. Inside was a control room, its walls lined with monitors, most cracked but one flickering with static. A console held a logbook, its entries recent, January 15th, 2025. Subject 12 remained stable. Circle directives updated. Loki's blood ran cold. Sarah was here now. He searched the room, finding a hidden door behind a rusted cabinet. It led to a padded cell, its walls scratched with frantic marks. On the floor lay a child's drawing, a tree, like the one in the quarry, with the word help scrawled beneath it. A faint sound, a sob, came from the shadows. Loki turned, his flashlight catching a figure curled in the corner. A woman, thin and pale, her hair matted. She looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "Sarah," Loki whispered. She nodded, trembling. They never let me go," she said, her voice barely audible. "The circle, they're everywhere." Before Loki could respond, a monitor flickered to life, showing a live feed of the hospital's entrance. A dozen figures in red masks stood outside, silent, watching. Loki grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her toward the door. "We're leaving. Now." But as they reached the corridor, his phone buzzed with a final text. "You found her. But you won't leave." The lights in the basement flickered, and a low hum filled the air, like the one in the quarry. Footsteps echoed from above, slow, deliberate, closing in. Can Loki save Sarah from the circle? What do they want with her? Uncover the truth in Part 6. Share your theory in the comments and subscribe to see how it ends. January 20th, 2025, Ashwood, Virginia. The basement of the abandoned psychiatric hospital pulsed with a low hum, the air thick with the stench of mildew and fear. Detective David Loki gripped Sarah Miller's trembling hand, her frail form barely able to stand after decades of captivity. The flickering monitor had revealed a chilling truth. A dozen figures in red masks waited outside, their silent presence a testament to the circle's reach. The files from the Red Room, now stuffed in Loki's jacket, exposed Project Ascent as a decades-long experiment in human reprogramming, orchestrated by a shadowy network that had infiltrated Ashwood's core. Sarah, Subject 12, was proof it hadn't ended. The child's voice on his radio, the texts from an unknown number, the man in the red mask who died by cyanide, all pointed to a conspiracy that refused to stay buried. "We're getting out," Loki whispered, his gun drawn as he led Sarah through the basement's maze of corridors. Her eyes, wide and haunted, darted to every shadow. "They're everywhere," she murmured. "The circle, they never stop." Loki's jaw tightened. He'd seen the logbook's recent entries, the Polaroids, the scars on Sarah's arms. She'd been held, conditioned, for nearly 30 years. Her brother Jacob's fate remained unknown, his name absent from the files. But Loki couldn't think about that now. Not with footsteps echoing above, slow and deliberate, like predators circling. The hospital's layout was a nightmare, its halls twisting, some blocked by collapsed ceilings. Loki found a stairwell leading up, but as they climbed, a metallic clank rang out. He froze, pulling Sarah behind him. A red-masked figure stood at the top of the stairs, a silenced pistol in hand. "You can't take her," the figure said, voice muffled but cold. Loki didn't hesitate. He fired, the shot echoing as the figure collapsed, the mask cracking on the concrete. Sarah gasped, clutching his arm. "There's more," she whispered. "Always more." Loki dragged the body aside, revealing a badge. Deputy Carl Harris, the coroner's assistant, the man who'd lied about the quarry body's wounds. The circle wasn't just outside Ashwood. It was inside, woven into the town's fabric. Loki's mind raced. Sheriff Daniels, the clerk, the sealed records. How deep did this go? He took the deputy's radio and keys, urging Sarah forward. "Stay close." They reached the hospital's main floor, the exit visible through shattered glass doors. But the monitor's image lingered in Loki's mind, a dozen masked figures waiting. He scanned the parking lot, spotting the black sedan and 3 others, their engines idling. No way out without a fight. Sarah's voice broke his thoughts. "The Red Room, it wasn't just me. They took others, trained us, made us forget who we were." She touched the drawing in her pocket, the tree with help scrawled beneath it. "I drew that to remember, to fight it." Loki's chest tightened. He'd failed a girl once, in Richmond. Not again. He handed Sarah the deputy's keys. "If I don't make it, take my car. Get to the FBI in Richmond. Show them the files." She shook her head, tears streaming, but he pushed her toward the exit. "Go." As Sarah ran, Loki stepped into the open, gun raised. The masked figures emerged from the shadows, their red masks glinting like blood in the moonlight. "Drop the files, detective," one said, his voice calm, authoritative. Loki recognized it, Sheriff Daniels. The betrayal stung, but Loki didn't flinch. "You're done, Daniels. The FBI gets these files tonight." Daniels laughed, raising his gun. "You think the circle stops at Ashwood? We're in every city, every agency. You're nothing." Loki dove behind a pillar as gunfire erupted, glass shattering around him. He returned fire, dropping 2 figures before a bullet grazed his shoulder, pain searing through him. Sarah screamed from the lot, and Loki saw her struggling with a masked figure near his car. Rage surged. He charged, tackling the figure and driving his fist into the mask until it cracked. Sarah scrambled into the driver's seat, the engine roaring to life. Loki held off the others, his shots precise despite the pain. Daniels advanced, his mask off now, eyes wild. "You can't stop us," he shouted. Loki aimed, but before he could fire, a shot rang out from behind. Daniels fell, blood pooling beneath him. Sarah stood in the car's doorway, holding the deputy's pistol, her hands shaking. "I remembered," she whispered. "They trained me to kill, but not for them." Loki grabbed her, and they sped away, the remaining figures scattering into the woods. At a gas station an hour later, Loki sent the files to an old FBI contact, along with a recording of Sarah's story. She spoke of the Red Room, the drugs, the voices that tried to erase her. Jacob, she said, had been taken elsewhere, his fate unknown. The Circle had planned to use her as a sleeper, a conditioned agent for their schemes. The mystical voice on the radio, a looped recording from her own sessions, used to lure Loki deeper. By dawn, the FBI raided Ashwood, arresting half the sheriff's department and seizing the quarry bunker. The Circle's network was exposed, but its leaders, names redacted even in the files, remained at large. Loki was suspended pending investigation, his career likely over. He didn't care. He drove Sarah to a safe house, her hand clutching the drawing of the tree. "You're free now," he said. She smiled faintly, but her eyes were distant. "They're still out there," she said. "The Circle doesn't end." Loki returned to the Miller house, one last time, placing Sarah's drawing on the kitchen table, a quiet tribute to her survival. As he left, he found a new notebook in his car, not his own. Inside, a single line in red ink, "The circle sees all." He burned it, but the unease lingered. Sarah was safe, Daniels was dead, but the shadows of Hollow Lane felt alive, watching. Is the circle truly gone? What happened to Jacob? Share your theory in the comments. Tell us where you're reading from, and subscribe for more mysteries that keep you guessing.